The movie begins in Dreadnought, the ship which belongs to General Ballarus, but before we begin, let's do a quick flashback to where we left off. Admiral Noble had promised an imminent attack on the village of Felt, whose inhabitants are farmers, after Cora joins forces with a few warriors and conquers Admiral Noble. This second part begins with the warriors. Cora General Titus Young, Miles, Tarek Nemesis, and Gunaho from the village returning to Felt, with the hope that the threat Admiral Noble has been destroyed. Let's also remember the rebels led by Blacks who died in battle, and his sister who's still alive and leading the other rebels tirelessly, fighting for freedom. Sam sees that the warriors have returned in sound form, and she hurries in to inform the young Private Ares who's taken the villagers' side that the warriors have returned. Just then a transmission comes in, and he gets notified by General Casas that they'd be arriving at Felt in 5 days, and so he must make sure the villagers provide the grain before their arrival, while Cora still assures the elder Hagen that Ateka Noble is dead. Private Ares walks in and shatters their hope with the info that Dreadnought will arrive the village in 5 days, and Sam confirms that it's true. Titus orders Hagen to call his people together, after which he gives a speech that demands the unity of everyone if they are going to survive the incoming battle. He also gives them what could be their strategy, which is using the grain as shields, because that way the Admiral wouldn't want to destroy it. Disappointed Cora, and Gunnar goes to a corner where he indirectly confesses his love for her, and they make love afterwards. Their core clarifies why the noble called her the most wanted criminal in the mother world, being the one who agreed to the assassination of the king and the princess. We see a flashback where the king and his family had been lured to a feast. But on getting there, it turned out to be a coup by General Ballarus, and Cora being the one who killed the princess herself. However, her adopted father Balaceras, who needed someone to answer for the murder of the royal family, tags it on Cora, but she fights her way out, which explains why she's been an outlaw. Ever since the next morning, the villagers gets to work to gather the crops, and we see everyone working together, seeing that their salvation could be the very crops itself. Meanwhile, at the slain king's ship, Noble regains consciousness, and Casas orders that the technicians set him free, and before he gives his first order, he vows to bring Cora, the Scargiver, to Ballarus as a way of revenge. The villagers, on the other hand, continues to work, dividing the labor to make it much easier. Until after a few days, they stow the grains in the barn. That night, Sam gives the warriors a gift, according to what she feels they bring to their village, and while they dance, we see James, who's living the life of a robotic loner. The next morning, Titus rings the bell for the big day ahead. That day they dig up defense holes and teach the villagers how to use the weapon they can handle. They also pull out the dropship. Cora landed with 2 seasons ago on Felt, surprised that it still works. She goes on to test it that night. The warriors gets to tell their side of the story, which explains how Ballarus took something from each of them, and now that loss has given them enough reason to stand together and seek justice. Titus goes first, and we see that once he did surrender in battle, just so the lives of his men can be spared, but the surrender costs him the lives of his men, and so now he vows never to surrender again. Young Miles goes next. She tells them how her people were cowards and couldn't fight the mother world, and so she was made to labor in a camp which was eventually liberated by the rebel Blood Axe, who became her new family. Nemesis also had a life long before Ballarus murdered everyone in her little fishing village until her birth for vengeance was born, when she cut her own hands to fix something more deadly. We also come to know that Taka is a prince of a long-lost kingdom after Basiria struck their kingdom, and he was smuggled out, so the royal blooding could be preserved the next morning, being the day of battle. Cora takes her dropship out of sight, and there she meets James, whom she asks to choose a site. Either he keeps taking commands from the man who had a hand in the king's death or fight for the poor villagers. However, he doesn't pick a side just yet. Soon the dreadnought arrives and everyone rounds up their work before finding positions in the ship. The admiral sees the cleverness of the villagers who hid the crops somewhere they cannot fire, but they still draw out a plan to subdue the village and take control. Kor, on the other hand, cuts her hair troops leaves in ships to land on the village. And we see the women and children being protected by Nemesis Ares, and possibly Sam the Admiral lands, and Korra moves into a hopeless negotiation. She confidently threatens the Admiral to leave, or she could possibly kill him again. Like the last time they met, after the Admiral refuses her offer to take the grain to feed their men and leave the villagers unharmed, he assures her that she's in no place to negotiate. We also see that part of the Admiral's plan involves his foot soldiers going after the women and children the village is hiding while they're negotiating. However, Noble tells her she could surrender herself for the village, and when Kororo attempts to go with him to be given over to Belarus, Gunnar agrees and sounds the alarm with a bullet, and all hell breaks loose. The first ship of the Admiral gets blown up, and Gunnar takes Korra on an Iraqis to her dropship. When the Admiral gets up, he gets underground alone to finish what they started as the war rages. The foot soldiers gets in the place where the women and children are hidden, and Nemesis begins to fight them off alone when the Admiral comes out. He gets on the ship, but one of the villagers, Den, angrily follows him after a fatal fight. Den gets slain like an animal and is kicked off from Dreadnought. Korra and Gunnar makes it to her dropship and attempts to get inside Dreadnought. The foot soldiers gets closer, and the men led by General Titus advances first before Tarek and the others in the tunnel dug by the villagers. One of them, who's almost dying, blows it up, causing other bombs to explode before the soldiers could escape the tunnels in Dreadnought ship. Soldiers takes in Korra and Gunnar, who's disguised as one of them. Meanwhile, Nemesis, who's been fighting alone, gets stabbed, and even the bravery of a little boy couldn't save her outside the battle rages on. And just when Titus and Tarek think they've been able to command victory, they realize that it's only the beginning. When the attack becomes fiercer, with war machines shooting at them, they follow their first instinct, which is to take cover in Dreadnought. Korra and Gunnar reveals themselves and kills the soldiers before hatching their next plan. Ghana has to go to their escape ship and get it ready while he waits for Korra, who's going to plant bombs in order to blow Dreadnought up on the ground. The battle gets more intense, and even young Miles has to leave her position to attack from behind until she successfully blows up one of the war machines. Korra, on the other hand, plants the bomb in Dreadnought, but she gets seen by a soldier, which breaks her cover while she fights her way out. A soldier reports an intrusion, and Noble immediately knows that it's Korra who's aboard their ship. However, he finds it perfect that she's comes to them. Noble also commands Cassasis to fire at the village, seeing that they could destroy the grain now, and their men on the ground simply suggests less men to feed. Then the Admiral goes after Korra in the village. Another war machine is revealed, and Tarak vents to Milius, that is very much afraid to Ding, that all hope has been lost, while they bask in their last words. James comes in and single-handedly saves the day by taking out what's left of the foot soldiers and also blowing up the machine. Now all eyes leads up to Dreadnought in the ship. We see that Gunnar is ready for departure, and he calls Korra to come in. Korra, who's busy taking out anyone standing in her way to meet Admiral Noble, informs Gunnar that she's on her way following the general's order to fire at the village at will. They soon realize that their ship has been planted with bombs which would go off once the cannons are used to fire. The ship begins to crash gradually, and Titus realizes that Korra is aboard the ship. Gunnar tries to help by shooting at the few men who've been ordered to capture Korra, but the Admiral gets him good. Korra and Noble engages in combat again for the second time after he was revived from the dead the first time, and this time the setting isn't quite favorable for both parry. Well, this time the general gets to overpower Korra, and just when he's about to make some beautiful revenge speech before executing her, he gets stabbed from behind by Gunnar, and Korra finishes him off as promised, with Gunnar baby injured. They find their way to an escape ship, but the ship loses balance and crashes. Eventually, Gunnar dies. Just then, the freedom fighters led by Lake Black's sister arrives and takes out what's left of the general ship fighters and grants the villagers freedom. At night, the fallen gets buried and Kor gets told, after she confesses that she is Aelia, the adopted daughter of General Balatzeras, and the assassin of the Princess Titus lets her know that he knew who she was all along, and informed her that the princess isn't dead yet because she's more than death itself. James joins them afterward on hearing that the princess might still be alive somewhere, and it pledges to fight alongside them until Ballaras is eliminated to find the princess, and to fight is the vow that closes the film.